Okay, good afternoon everybody, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. According to what I can see here, there are 34 attendees on the call. Would somebody or a few people just please shout out and acknowledge that they can hear me?
Might need to use the Q&A.
So, as you can see on the screen there, it says you may ask questions via the Q&A function. So could somebody please type in there that they can hear me, and then we will proceed once I'm aware that I can actually be heard. I can hear. Lovely. Thank you very much. So, okay, my name is Steve Halsey. I'm from UK Power Networks, and I'm the product lead for this particular product, which is the system-wide resource register. I'm joined today by my colleague John West from the ENA, who has been assisting me very closely in developing this particular work. And our technical wizard today, who's going to make sure everything happens properly, is Daniel Cleland. So, on the assumption that I can be heard, I shall continue and say if you've got any questions and or if you would like to make any comments, please use the Q&A function rather than the chat function, and we will try to deal with as many of those questions or comments that come up either at the time or at the end of the presentation, if that makes more sense. It says there as well, we're recording the audio. Any chat messages will be anonymised, and we will make the information available on the website shortly after today. So let me continue if I may. So I'm going to make an assumption that people are reasonably au fait and aware with where we are and what's occurring, but I shall cover some background necessarily. So we are delivering proposals to put in place a system-wide resource register, and this work builds upon the work that was done last year to develop the background and the outlook for this particular product. We've spent probably the first 5 or 6 months of this year developing a number of options, and we presented those options to the Open Network Steering Group last month, and our plan going forward from today is to present our final findings to the Open Network Steering Group tomorrow, and that will take into account any feedback that we receive from you today. Third point there, it takes account of a lot of the good work done by the Energy Data Task Force and some other industry initiatives that are going on, and I'll cover those in a moment. So the key bit for us is we would like further input from potential users, and hopefully we've got some potential users of the system-wide resource register on the call, so that we can better understand how you would use it and then articulate the benefits to the steering group tomorrow. So, as I said, please add any comments. It doesn't have to be questions. If you've got any comments, then please shout those out using the Q&A function on your screen now. So, just to provide a bit of context, system-wide resource register and the work that we're doing is shown in the middle here, and where we have got to and what we presented and had approved by the steering group already is that each DNO and the TSO and the TO and the ESOs at the back or the top there each of them will provide a separate spreadsheet in a consistent format that comprises of all of the data fields that have been agreed and that we are able to provide, taking account of any confidentiality requirements. There are some other pieces of work going on currently. Ofgem are looking to update the form of LTDSs and trying to create some consistency in that area also. There is a separate project, the Recorder project, and that may well is looking at something similar, but may well look to develop it through a separate mechanism and use a blockchain solution for that. And very, very recently, in the top right-hand corner, as it mentions there, a particular customer raised a Jacuzza proposal, which has now got the number of DCP 350 for network companies to establish DER registers. And that really sort of supplements and supports, we believe, the work that we are doing in developing a system-wide resource register. So what have we done so far? We have put in place on the ENA web pages a single repository for all DNO currently available pieces of information. So you can see there, for example, on your screen, Electricity Northwest and Northern Power Grid. And were you to click on either of those, or indeed the companies that are below, that would take you to the relevant DNO's web page, and on that web page would be access to things like contracted connections registers, DG mapping capacity maps, and in some instances, some DNOs have also got their network records in digitised format there, but not all DNOs have got that. So that is a single place for new customers to go to, and at the bottom of that page, you can't see that here, of course, is the opportunity to provide some feedback, and the link for that is actually provided at the top there. So the feedback that we've had so far, I've got to say, has been limited, and the real reason for today is to try and get that feedback from you, as I said. To support all of the work that we've been doing so far, there is also an information sheet, which the final, or pretty well the final version of that is shown on the right-hand side there, and we will make that available both after today and after the steering group meeting to reflect any changes that may be relevant.
Yeah. Can I say, it's John West here. Hi, everybody. Yeah, the information sheet has already been made through one or two channels, like the what we call the DER Connection Steering Group, and I think the advisory group as well. So that is already out in the public domain to some extent. Just picking up on a question or a comment I saw coming through, Lisa, I think it was sort of saying that, giving us a little bit of context behind the Jacuzza mod, so thank you for that. And maybe the link doesn't work, so I thought it did, but we better check that in the slides that we send out after the sesh. Okay, thanks.
Yep, fine. Okay. So, moving on to the next bit. So, this is quite a busy slide here, and just to pick out some key bits of information. So, box at the bottom left-hand corner there is the initial system-wide resource register spreadsheet that DNOs will make available will be for assets greater than 1 megawatts only, and that's the initial view. There may be a later development where we look to include assets below 1 megawatt, but they are significantly greater in volume. There are broadly three colours that you can see there: the blue boxes, the green boxes, and the yellow boxes. The blue boxes really cover things like the DER location, the capacity, the technology, and you can see in each of the boxes there the field tag name. And those field tag names are pretty well those names and identifiers that were developed through the work done last year. Some of those have been sharpened up, tidied up a little bit, as well as the field descriptor, and DNOs through this particular product have been working hard to get a consistent understanding of what each of those fields means to them, and we are in that position that when we publish some information, customers will be able to take benefit, if you like, that something that's in one cell on one spreadsheet has exactly the same meaning in another spreadsheet. So that's the blue boxes. That's probably the general data, the background information. The bits in the darker blue, such as customer name and the customer site, currently we would not be able to publish that, and that would be subject to confidentiality, and DNOs are not able to do that as part of Section 105 of the Utilities Act predominantly. We are starting a separate piece of work and are taking legal advice on how we might unlock that, and we're working fairly closely with Ofgem and BEIS to understand the best way of achieving that. So we're getting some more questions come through here. Daniel, can everybody see all of the questions?
No, I'm not sure.
Right, okay, so let me just shout out some of the questions that we've got here. How do they do it under the capacity market? The mod was on behalf of the BEIS panel of technical experts. Thank you for that. Mod behalf on the BEIS panel of technical experts, so that's a bit of clarification in terms of what I said there, and that's from the customer that actually raised this initially. And how do they do it under capacity market? I assume, how do they provide customer name and customer site under that mechanism?
I don't know for sure, but I would assume, like some other things, for example, the National Grid tech register, there is probably a license obligation or a piece of code somewhere which authorises that to happen. Yeah. And that's what we don't yet have in place for the registers here.
Yeah. So I've spoken about the blue boxes. The next to look at the yellow boxes, which are sort of the network reinforcement boxes, and this was to try to identify any network reinforcement that would be applicable to those projects that are at an accepted status. So, for example, the DNO makes a connection offer to a customer, and in making that connection offer, that offer might say, well, we actually need to upgrade or do some upgrade works at a particular grid site, so can we make that information more available and relate that to that particular project that is ultimately then accepted? That piece of work is slightly more of a challenge for the DNOs, but we're working actively on that. And then lastly, in the green box, which is entitled Providing Services, that is more about sort of flexibility and those customers that are currently providing flexibility services to DNOs. And there aren't too many customers and there aren't too many sites in that box currently, but we expect the number of customers fitting into that box probably to grow over time. So that's where we are. They're the data fields that they're working with currently, and we will release information on each of those at slightly different stages as we develop the proposals for that. So I've had more questions come through. So let me do that. So up there. So changing the Energy Act due September. I'm not 100% sure myself what those changes will mean and will include. I'm not aware of that. Will active network management sites be included? I think that is probably what we intend to do, yes.
So we have a field in there, a bit hard to see on the screen, I accept, but it's managed connection arrangements, and the idea there is that we will flag those resources that are behind a managed type arrangement, such as an A&M arrangement or some sort of operational tripping arrangement.
Okay, and a couple of more comments then. So reinforcement is a nice to have, but less urgent than the rest, and we recognise that in terms of our timescales for delivering this. So stuff in the blue box, we're looking at January next year, and the stuff in the yellow box, blue and green boxes, probably around about January next year, and the network reinforcement associated works is probably planned for July next year. And one further question, will flexibility services include ESO services, e.g. store? So we had a bit of a debate about, God, questions are coming through quicker than I can probably answer them now. Will flexibility services include ESO services? So we had a bit of a discussion at a meeting that we had yesterday, it was only yesterday in fact, about how resources and or connections related to a particular DNO or distribution or transmission network would be recorded. And I'll let John answer that as well.
Yeah, so just there's a couple of things there. I've just been watching the questions come through, so I'll just try and pick up on some of those things. So first of all, on the services thing, ideally, yes, we want to capture where services that are connected at distribution are providing services, be they services to they're a distribution company or be they services to the ESO. So that's certainly the intention. We may be, again, sort of step into some confidentiality aspects there because there will be provisions in some of the agreements that the ESO, for example, has in place with store providers that might preclude us from including some of that information. But where we can and where the ESO can give us the information and they are part of this, we'll try and publish that, yeah. So that was one thing. I think in terms of, I think Lisa again had a question around timescales. So I think as Steve was saying, we're going to try and get what we would call the general. There's a bit more detail on this later on in terms of the options, but we're trying to get the stuff in blue, the general stuff, definitely in place by January. Ideally, some of that in place before January, and we're setting ourselves a target of November to get initial registers up and running. So that sort of meets the December time frame. The stuff in green, the providing services stuff, the volume of information there will be a lot less. So ideally, we'll get that up and running by January of next year as well. The harder bit for us is the stuff in yellow, the linking specific resources to network reinforcement, because that sort of thing requires a bit of work to happen within the DNOs, probably some new processes, some new data links to be set up, and that might take a little bit longer. So we're setting a slightly longer timescale on that. There's a question which is about aggregation of small units less than a megawatt. To begin with, we're setting ourselves the target of including all generators, storage, and larger demands that might be providing services in the register, including all of those above 1 megawatt in size. I think going forward, depending on our success with that, I guess, and the use that people find from that sort of information, we will look within the work stream that we have set up for this of moving below 1 megawatt and dropping that threshold. But I think we're very focused at the moment in just getting the 1 megawatt stuff sorted out and into play. So we've got a question there, should reinforcement be tied to location, time, and type of violation? So initially we're going to, it'll only be certain of the resources, those assets or resources that are already connected shouldn't be linked to a network reinforcement. It'll be assets or resources which are contracted or accepted to connect by network companies, which will probably be linked to one or more reinforcements. And the idea will be that where there is something which is accepted to connect and it's linked to a reinforcement, there'll be a a cross-reference to that reinforcement, and there will be some further description then of the reinforcement, what it's about, what it's needed for, when it's likely to be completed, that sort of information. So does that take us up to speed with questions, Daniel? Or are we, yeah.
I think that's all the questions for now. So hopefully that gives a good understanding of where we are, the data structure and the data fields. But at this point, I'll hand over to John more formally for him to sort of take you through some of the benefits and trying to get some more interaction from yourselves in terms of how it might be used. So over to you, John.
Yeah. Okay. So we're on slide 7, and we've got a very simple diagram there, which is just our thinking around how the system-wide resource register or these data registers might be used going forward. So one way might be to allow potential developers the opportunity to better understand connection opportunities in different areas. Another way might be going forward, depending on what happens with the access review, it might highlight where there are opportunities to trade connection rights, perhaps. We should be able to, or our users should be able to start to be able to better predict energy requirements in certain areas, based on what sort of resources are in that area, and that might be a benefit to suppliers, for example. Opportunities to provide flexibility are really for network companies, by and large. They'll be able to look at this and sort of say, well, okay, we need to do something in a particular area, and I can see that there are a number of resources there which we might want to utilize or might be able to utilize. So those sorts of opportunities become more clear, more manifest. There's policy review and opportunities. So, one of our biggest stakeholders, I guess, in this so far has been, or two of our biggest stakeholders who sit on the Open Networks group have been BES and Ofgem, and they're very keen that we get better information in place so that they can see exactly what's connected where and what's changing, and that helps them to understand the effectiveness of policy, that sort of thing. And there are a couple of other potential benefits shown there. I think just to move it on a little bit, whilst these all seem like possible ways in which an SWRR might be used, when we've talked about it with some of the the stakeholder groups that we interact with a bit more, such as our Open Networks Advisory Group and the DER Connection Steering Group that I think I mentioned earlier, we get a bit of feedback, but it tends to be at a fairly high level. So it would be good to get any more feedback that we can in this space, and if people on the call think, gosh, I would use it for this or I wouldn't use it for that, I think it's that sort of information we're really interested in having, because it'll get us more insight on what are the more important parts of the information. Okay, so before I move on to the next slide, I think we've got a couple more questions which have come in. The location information, this is from Robert Friel. The location information is limited to network primary substation. Why would geospatial information not be included on more local connection information? Scope design for the long term rather than immediate needs. That's probably true. I think we're trying to keep it as probably as straightforward as possible at this stage. I mean, we've talked through primary substation, bulk supply point, grid supply point, and using that sort of structure. Geospatial information, anything, Steve, on that?
Well, I think, again, sort of geospatial information, it would predominantly need to be linked to information that currently DNOs have, and speaking on behalf of UK Power Networks specifically, we do not currently have all of our records available in a digitised format. So for us in particular, it would be difficult to provide geospatial format. We are working on that currently, but I think for now, for consistency, we're going to focus on the information that I described earlier and John has just sort of provided also.
Okay, good. Ross Kirkland has got a question, which is, or an observation. In the future, this may be of use for site identification for the evaluation of potential EV charging infrastructure sites, which was interesting. That was one of the cases that was raised by the advisory group, and I think it was Simon Gill of the Scottish Government said, yeah, that might be the sort of thing that we could use for exactly that sort of stuff. Yeah, so that's good. Grace Smith, how will the register be kept up to date? And essentially, this is I guess the commitment going forward really that we're looking from the network companies. We've worked out that there will be an amount of time and effort required to keep the register up to date. At the moment, we're proposing to do that monthly, and there will be someone or someone's in place in each of the network companies to do that. And then I think Lisa and Matthew have identified a couple of further possibilities. Could be used for derating setting in the capacity market, great, and could encourage shared access, i.e. finding a local asset to balance your demand against. Yeah, which is good. Excellent. Okay. So I think if we move on to the next slide, so I think we're sort of starting to do this. As I say, we've had some feedback through our established channels. We're trying to get a bit more feedback here. We're after very much how the SWR might be used, what might the benefits be, what are the most valuable areas of data. So I think if you continue to feed in some of the comments like you're doing, that'll be super. I think Dan will send around a questionnaire or a few questions after this, which will give you another opportunity just to feedback some of this stuff. It's all incredibly useful for us because what we're trying to balance off here is there is a cost involved in terms of resource and probably some IS costs within the network companies, and we need our network companies, sort of senior managers, to buy into that, and they want to see the benefits side of the equation as well. So I think all of this is really helpful in that respect. Have we got anything else that's come through there in terms of comments?
Yes.
Thanks, Dan. Something from Andrew. Benefit is magnified if access review moves to a shallow connection charge. Prospective connectees will have a more complex decision on where to site. Yeah. So again, I think that's a good point to take on board. Excellent. Okay. Good. Should we keep it rolling and just move on to the next slide? So there's 2 or 3 more slides here which you just want to pick up on. The next couple of slides just pick up on some of the EDTF work, the Energy Data Task Force work. We've tried to stay fairly close to that, I think, as Steve said earlier, and we very much see, you see with this little diagram here that the resource registers or resource register sort of fits pretty neatly with the sort of data catalog idea that or action that is coming out of the EDTF work. So in the fullness of time, we would expect those registers to be linked to and accessible from the data catalog, however that is implemented. And if we go on to the next slide, which is perhaps a little bit more intense, this again is just looking at some of the data fields, and we were sort of stepping through that really from an EDTF perspective. And for those of you who have had a look at the EDTF report, you'll see that it talks about open data and different classes of data. So if you see in the bottom left-hand corner of this slide, we've got open data, public data, shared data, closed data, different types of data depending on whether that data can be accessed openly or whether it has to be restricted in some way. And we have had a reasonably close look at the data fields that we are trying to include here. And there are a few of those fields. Steve mentioned confidentiality to begin with, and in particular, the DNOs are restricted at the moment by the Utilities Act and wouldn't be able to publish customer name or customer site. So probably to begin with, we'll need to anonymize that. We are hopeful, though, of pushing through and getting the license or code change that will allow that information to be included. And it may be that the Dacusa mod that Steve talked about in the earlier slide will be a way in which we can do that. But we are not letting that sort of hold us up. What we want to do is get some data out there, publish what we can, respect the existing sort of confidentiality limitations, and if we can get changes to code or changes to license that let us put in place more information, then we will do that. I think just to add to that, it's not 100% of customers that will want their data published. I think what we found and what we've had some feedback on is that some customers prefer to for whatever reason, prefer to remain beneath the radar, be they secure sites or whatever. They may have good reason for doing that. Couple more questions here. Will behind the meter assets be included? I'm going to sort of ask Steve just to pick up on that in a minute. I think possibly not to begin with. I think we will want, at the moment, to begin with, we're putting the onus on DNOs and transmission companies to make sure that we've got everything which is connected to their networks covered. I think we'll try and spread it out to IDNOs over maybe not the first 6 months, but in the fullness of time. As for behind the meter assets, Steve, anything to?
No, I think on day one, our intention is that our intention is to only capture assets that are connected directly to DNO networks.
Yeah. Okay. Lisa, can you do fuel type under the Act? I'm not sure quite what the question is there, but we've certainly got a field in there which is trying to describe the type of asset, and what we're proposing to use at the moment are the categories that have been developed for G98 and G99,
yep.
And which are also being used for the grid code changes. So we've got we're not trying to invent something new there. We just want to pick up information that hopefully customers are providing in the first place. Lisa, again, this has to be mandatory. It's not for customers to opt out. Sort of understand the sort of sentiment there, but we will find one or two cases, like I say, where customers won't want to have, and we'll try and include the information, but it will be anonymized or aggregated or using one of those techniques that are sort of laid out in the IETF report, just to protect the customer interest there. Andrew has a question. Has any form or consideration of alignment of the data to the Common Information Model, CIM standards for data definitions been given yet? We haven't set up there. We haven't sort of thought in terms of CIM. Perhaps we should have a look at that. What we are thinking, though, is we will. Key to this will be getting really good, solid definitions in place that the different network companies are clear on. And, so we are putting a bit of time and effort into getting good definitions in place with the team that we've set up. But maybe we need to have a quick look at CIM and just think about that. Grace benefits are likely to be limited unless the register is comprehensive of all assets. I agree. I think it would be more valuable if you've got all the assets in there, and we will try to reflect as far as possible all the assets in. It just might be that some of them are anonymized in some way. So I think we do have to strike this balance between getting as complete a picture as possible, but respecting confidentiality. And even if we make a code change or are able to make a code or a license change, we will find that some customers will have direct sort of contract provisions in place with their local network operator not to disclose certain information. Some other questions is great. Benefits are likely to be limited. So we've touched on that. I'm sorry, a comment from me, so we know where all the MOD sites are. Well, yeah, okay. And what are the secret sites you have in mind? Well, gosh, I don't know. Is there more? Yeah, I think I'll pick up on those. Yeah. So if we could go to maybe the next slide. We want to leave ourselves a little bit of time at the end, but we can just pick up any final stuff. So we've got a slide here which just gives you a sense of some of the different options, and this is sort of quite important in the sense of we are exploring some different ways of doing this, or different approaches to doing this, and this is quite a complicated little table which we just cut and pasted from some of the stuff that we did with our Open Network Steering Group. But if you look at options from top to bottom, so option 1A and option 1B are essentially putting the onus on the DNOs and indeed the TOs to produce network registers and to manage those locally, albeit to a very consistent and common format. And that's probably a large part of what we're going to begin with. Options 2 and 3 are sort of similar. They sort of say, well, okay, you could take that and then build that up or centralize that in a single register in some way. Build a database which draws all of that information in from each of the DNOs and make it a little bit easier to access. That has effectively an extra bit of IS and some extra cost involved in that. So we think probably we'll hold off on doing that until we've got 1A and 1B reasonably well sorted out. And then options 4 and 5 just start to stir in the information on flexible resources and flexible services. And we initially offered this up and sort of said, well, yeah, we could do this as well. And those two stakeholders that we have on the steering group, i.e. Bez and Ofgem, were very keen that we try and get this information in from day one, as I think they would like to have as transparent and as clear a picture of service providers available there, available more generally. So we will try and do that. Okay, so there's effectively a set of options 1A through to 5 there, which sort of build on each other. At the moment, we're probably in the space where we're going to be delivering 1A, are proposing to deliver 1A, 1B, and 4/5 to begin with. If we go to the final slide, I think it's the final slide, we have preferred options. We've already had one go at reviewing the options with the Open Network Steering Group. I think it's just repeating this paragraph, what I just said, really, that we're minded to sort of push on with option 1A and 1B, and as Steve was saying, we've got a a further engagement with our steering group tomorrow, where we'll go through that in a bit more detail, and include as well information on services provided by flexible resources. So we set ourselves a very clear goal, our set of goals, which we'll try and do through the rest of this year for the general information that we talked about before and the services information, and tie in the network reinforcements early next year. So we had a couple more questions there, which are thoughts on the different options, and really a final question, which I think is probably the same question. Is it okay to have separate registers for each network company, or should we be looking to centralize this via a single database or portal? So those are two further things that we're after getting thoughts back on. So if I can just pick up on some of the further questions. So Paul is sort of saying, is connection voltage in there?
What was that, sorry?
For the resources, is the connection voltage in there? I think it is,
yes.
Isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Certainly feels like it should be. Matthew is saying it could encourage the flexibility. First commitment, I agree. Yeah, absolutely. Lisa, very much in place, wanting a centralized system, 1A, 2A, then 1B. Yeah, I think we will keep in mind the centralization of this. When we looked at it before, it does have the potential to add a chunk more time and a chunk more cost. So we want to get the local registers in place, relatively complete, owned by the DNOs, and the DNOs sort of feeling responsible for those. And that's our approach at the moment, but we haven't ruled out the centralized system by any means, and we will be having some more discussion on that. Andrew, if option 1, will format be defined in a code? Total alignment of format between all will make the data much more accessible than approximate alignment. I absolutely agree, and we're very sort of sensitive to this, Andrew. I'm not sure that we want to sort of boil it into a code, but as I was saying before, we are spending time in getting the clearest possible definitions in place of the different fields, so that each network company will interpret that as consistently as possible. So the look and feel of each of the registers for the network companies should be the same, and the way they fill it in with data should be the same. Lisa, have we consulted on these options? You didn't miss it. The consultation really has been more about discussion within those groups I mentioned before, the advisory group, the DER connection steering group. I think some of the DNOs have done things with some of their own customer groups, and indeed, we're doing this webinar, so we're trying to get a feel, get some feedback. But I think when we kicked this off at the beginning of the year, we were very much in place. I think this was one of the things that we said, well, okay, we don't want to consult on everything. We won't consult on this. We'll do it in a less formal way. What feels more important here is to get something up and running, and then once we have that in place, we can develop it further and hopefully make it work well for everybody. Paul, I think separate registers would be fine as long as data formats are consistent. Thank you. Yeah, I agree, at least to begin with. Andrew, as per question, reasonably agnostic to separate one per company provided yeah, so we're getting a strong feedback there that we need that consistency across companies. Good question from Paul. Have we given any thought to data timeliness? How real time will the stored data be? We have yeah, given that some thought, we're in the place at the moment of making sure it's updated every month. We think, talking to people within the network companies, that seems reasonable from the point of view of keeping data timely and how much information is likely to change, on a month-to-month basis. So we'll certainly start off that way, and if it works, yeah, that's what we're trying to do. Andrew, if a centralized model, I imagine this would be done by National Grid, aggregating DNO supplied information using GSP. What value do you think we add as a family of DNOs by aggregating ourselves and providing to NG or GEM, etc.? It could, one option, National Grid have registers in place at the moment, like the embedded register. One option might be to develop that as a central repository. That would be one way of doing it. So, yeah, I think we're relatively open to different solutions there, if it's centralized. So Lisa, please can everyone look at the mod? Then we should be consulted, and it sounds like the Dacusa mod is the way forward. So we'd echo that. I think as far as possible, we will try and stay very close to the Dacusa mod on this. So we think we by doing these registers, we've got a way of helping those parties who want that Dacusa mod to go forward to implement something reasonably quickly. And what we'd like to do, I guess the quid pro quo there is we'd like to find a way of staying close to that mod and hopefully getting that mod moving on in a reasonably quick timescale, because if we can get that coder license obligation in place, it'll be very helpful to enabling us to publish more of the data.
Yeah, on the Dacusa mod, DNOs have already had an email from the panel asking them to nominate representatives to sit on that working group. So it's moved on quite quickly.
Yeah, okay. Another question, are the updates the same day every month? That's, well, I guess we've got to work that one out. It's once a month. It would seem sensible if we're doing them by the end of the month or something like that. But to be honest, we haven't tasked anybody with that level of detail yet. With that as yet. So I think, Dan, is that all the questions that we've had so far? So we've got a few minutes left. I think we've done the slides. I think that's been really, really good in that we've got 35, sort of 40 comments and questions coming through, which is good. As I say, Dan will send around the slides. We'll just check out the link to the data that we've already put onto the Open Network site and just make sure that works. And any further feedback will be useful and will be used. I think, yeah, just watch this space, I guess, in the sense of, once we've got something up and running with our steering group, we'll try and keep, certainly people that have been on the call today reasonably up to speed with what we're doing. So, Steve, anything else you?
No. I think that's been, as John said, really, that's been really, really useful. There's lots of questions. Hopefully, we've done our best to answer those as we've been going along, and some good supporting comments to help us with our presentation to the steering group tomorrow. So all very useful. I think it probably just remains to say, if you do have any further comments after today, then please do use the link, and Daniel will send out the correct link to enable that to work on the bottom of the existing interim measure that we put in place on the ENA website. So please do use that. Hopefully it was useful for you guys. Thank you for your input. And if we don't have any further questions, which it looks like we don't currently, then I propose that on a very hot afternoon.
Yeah, I mean we'll have another look through the questions afterwards, and if we see anything that we feel we haven't picked up properly in the discussion here, we'll get back on those for sure. But I think it's been really useful, so thank you for that, and thanks for taking the time on. Yeah.
So thank you very much. We're just about to end the call. Have a safe day and be safe, certainly in the very hot weather. Thank you.